Police are up against a serial rapist, an odious criminal, and one of the hardest to catch. But can a tenacious investigator using a new forensic tool, geographical profiling, zero in on where the rapist lives and nab him? Enter the world of forensic science, the science of crime, where a suspect's guilt or innocence can hang on a single piece of evidence. We tend to think of criminals as outlaws, out there, thinking totally differently than we do. But investigators tell us that's a mistake. Criminals are so much like us. They're often invisible, unsuspected. It was the summer of 1987 in Lafayette, Louisiana. Like the gators, he was always looking for prey. And he found her. The woman seemed to live alone. He would come back later. He snipped the telephone wire.
What he'd do is he'd break in while the victims are asleep. Demand money. He'd go through their purses, have them empty their purses. But afterwards, then he'd actually commit the assault.
He was what profilers call a power reassurance rapist. His approach, I'm in control, and if you do what I say, nothing will happen to you. Then he intimidated the woman by telling her he wouldn't have come in and raped her if only she had kept her window locked. Finally, he warned her that if she reported him to police, he would come back and hurt her or her loved ones. In 1987, Mac Gallion was a patrolman accompanying the detective called in to investigate the rape. Little did he know that this would become his career-defining case.
Well, at that time, there were no suspects. Also, we didn't use DNA at that time. We had really nothing to go on. There were no evidence that we could use at that particular time to make an arrest.
The rapist had cleaned up after himself and left no fingerprints, no hairs, no fibers. But a vaginal swab yielded a sample of the rapist's semen. Though the sample wasn't of immediate use, it was preserved. As for the woman, she was traumatized. Ahead of her were years of overwhelming fear and mistrust, broken relationships, and black holes of depression, and the terror of knowing that the rapist was still out there. Seven years passed. Mac Gallion had risen in the ranks and had become a detective himself. That's when he was called out on another case.
I had an opportunity to actually speak with the victim. She was later taken to the hospital where she was examined and evidence was collected there.
The woman described how the man had attacked while she was asleep. He wore a bandana. He said he was there to rob her and then raped her. The description was that of a power reassurance rapist.
You see, are not acts of sex, but more of an act of power to power upon a person.
A vaginal swab in this 1994 assault also yielded a semen sample of the rapist. Though by 1994, DNA testing had been added to the forensic arsenal, the sample didn't match any of the likely suspects. This, too, seemed unsolvable. Then, a year later, in 1995, Mack overheard a conversation between a detective and a sergeant about a third. It sounded like they were reading from his 1994 case file. It starting out as a robbery, the bandana, blaming it on the woman herself, another power reassurance rapist excited by control. Mack asked them for a biological sample from this new case. When the DNA was compared to the sample from his 94 case, it was a match.
He had asked me to see if two unsolved cases might possibly have come from the same source. He felt that the MOs of the cases were similar enough to be the same person. We compared the two DNA profiles, and we did find that they were identical. And that's when we knew we had a serial rapist operating.
Mack thought about the case from 1987 and had that biological sample tested as well. It too came back a match. Mack went back into the Lafayette police files. With uncanny skill, he picked out more than a dozen other unsolved cases between 1987 and 1995 where the rapist's MO seemed similar. DNA confirmed they were all the same rapist. Because all the assaults took place in one particular area, he was dubbed the Southside rapist. But what was the underlying pattern? All the women were white, but of different ages. All the women were attacked in their homes, but their homes ranged from upper class to low-income housing projects. Mack was put in charge of the investigation. Certain questions would plague him. Who was this rapist? What did he look like? Where was he? What would it take to catch him? And how many more women would be raped before he was caught? The Southside rapist had struck at least 15 times between the years 1984 and 1995.
I always felt a sense of urgency on this case because I could never tell when he was going to go out and actually do this again. And I mean, the individuals who are attacked like that, I mean, their lives are just completely thrown out of regular norms. It really does horrible things to them.
In 1995, Mack helped set up a special task force, but amazingly the rapist didn't strike that year, or the next. So by the end of 1996, the task force was disbanded. Once again, it was just Mack. Then he got a break. The survivor of the 1994 had a nightmare in which, for an instant, she glimpsed the rapist's face. Upon waking, she realized it was a memory she had suppressed, but she couldn't recall the rapist's face clearly enough to describe him to a police sketch artist. That's when Mack decided to enlist the help of a hypnotist.
It said that we can recall anything that we hear, see, feel, taste, or touch. It's permanently ingrained there. It's just a matter of getting back to it. But through hypnosis, we can take you back in time to that place and tap into your subconscious and get that information.
Though the woman was scared about reliving the experience, She consented to a session with a hypnotist and a police sketch artist. Anything to help catch the rapist. As the event was too brutal and traumatic to put the woman directly back in the past, the hypnotist uses the movie theater technique, where the subject is told she is watching a movie of the event, a documentary of her life.
Is she going to still experience some of the anxiety? Certainly, but it's not quite the same as taking her back through that experience.
He gives her a remote control so she can control the movie. It's just like a regular remote, but with one additional special button, a panic button. Whenever she needs to, she can stop the movie, and all her fears and anxieties will melt into the chair and drain away. Then it's time to start. With her eyes closed, he mentally guides her into a movie theater, down the aisle, and to her seat. The movie begins the day before and takes the woman through everything that led up to the...
In hypnosis, we can cover a day in 30 minutes. We can fast forward, we can rewind, we can still time, we can freeze frame time, so to speak. And in her particular case, we took her back to that date and time. When we started to get into the actual assault, the victim started sweating profusely. She was very red in the face. There were several times where we had to just stop in still frame and assure her that she was very safe and very secure. Actually, what we did was rewound the film and then had her go back through step by step in this process, where she went through the actual up until the point in time where she told us that the rapist, in fact, did remove this handkerchief at a specific point in time, momentarily, to kiss her, and then pushed it back up. At that point in time, we rewound, we froze that frame, and then we were able to go through step by step, starting with the eyes, then the nose, then the mouth, the cheeks, the neck area, the ears, the overall head, the hair, the eyebrows, the forehead, getting all of that information during that hypnosis session as the composite sketch artist would sketch it.
Suspects who bore a resemblance to the sketch were questioned about being the Southside rapist. Some had solid alibis. Those who didn't were asked for DNA samples. But there was no match. But Mac refused to give up. He knew the survivors would never feel closure until the rapist was caught. He read books on psychological profiling and reread the FBI's file on the Southside rapist. In 1997, police had called a meeting of all the known victims of the Southside rapist. One similarity many of them reported was that the rapist carried a large black flashlight. One woman said that she could feel its heat next to her, and that the way the rapist held it was just like a policeman. Now you can buy one of these types of flashlights at the local hardware store. But back in the 1980s, they were pretty much only used by police, firefighters, utility workers, and security guards. This fit the FBI profile that the Southside rapist might be a police officer or a police wannabe. Then something strange happened in Mac's own house. He and his wife had gone to a function at his daughter's school. When he came home, his front door was wide open. Nothing had been stolen or disrupted. Was the Southside rapist now searching for Mac as much as Mac was searching for him? DNA hadn't cracked the case, nor had the police sketch. So Mac contacted Canadian Kim Rossmo, who had pioneered a new forensic tool, geographical profiling.
Geographic profiling comes out of a theoretical area called environmental criminology, which doesn't ask the question, why did Johnny become a bad boy? It says, assuming Johnny's a bad boy, what is the influence of the environment on his crime patterns?
More specifically, it asks, where should investigators look for Johnny?
Rather than figure out where crimes will happen, the question was, if we already know where they've taken place, what can we say about where the person responsible for those crimes most probably lives?
Exhibit A map of Lafayette, Louisiana. Profilers would try to zero in on the rapist's hunting area, the most likely area where this predator lived. In May of 1998, geographical profilers Kim Rossmo and Brad Moore flew from Vancouver to see if they could help Detective Mac Gallion catch the Southside rapist.
Our goal is to see the crime sites both during the day, because that's when you can actually see them, but also during the time that the offender's committing the offenses, because the world is very different. For example, it is very different at 4 p.m. than it is at 4 a.m., and it's different on a Sunday than it is on a Wednesday.
At each location, they look at what surrounds the house. What was at the end of the street? What was around the corner? Where people parked? The footpaths? The hiding places? The possible escape routes? Anything that could help them zero in on the predator's hunting pattern. They're hunting the hunter, so they try to put themselves in the predator's shoes and see the world as he does.
It could be whether the lights appear to be on and we can tell that from the road, whether or not there's a two-car garage but only one car is parked there, with the curtains are left open, signs of maybe decay or an indication that a man is not present might be relevant for assault type of crime.
One thing all the targets shared was that they were quite accessible from the street, and it would have been easy for the rapist to check it out from the sidewalk or peer in a window. It suggested the rapist was not a stalker who followed women home, but rather a prowler, a predator who roamed the area hunting for prey.
It's been said that humans are just more complicated forms of animals, and I think we see that with hunting behavior. Animals need to eat, and animals need to avoid being eaten. We can see the same thing with criminals. They need to find victims, but they also don't want to get caught by the police.
After 3 exhaustive days, Kim Rossmo flew back to Vancouver and fed all the data into Rigel, his software program named for a star in the belt of Orion the Hunter.
We take all the crime locations and we put them in as coordinates, or we digitize them directly onto the map of the area. And then the computer will generate, in this case, about 500,000 calculations, and will produce for us what we call a jeopardy surface, the most likely area of offender residence.
Lafayette's total area is about 61 square kilometers or 24 square miles. The profilers had narrowed down where the rapist probably lived to a 1 square mile area. Then, on December 1st, 1998, police receive an anonymous tip to check out Randy Como, who is an officer in the Lafayette Sheriff's Office. Mac gets a trusted friend at the Sheriff's Office to secretly fax him Randy Como's personnel file. Randy Como's home address is well inside the geographical profiler's jeopardy zone. Even more damning, the house he lived in prior to 1991, when most of the took place, is dead center. Now he checks the composite sketch. These days, Randy Como has changed his overall appearance. He wears glasses and sports a new hairstyle. But photos of Como before 1995 show a remarkable resemblance to the suspect. The lab has a DNA sample of the Southside rapist. Now they need Como's DNA. So an investigator working undercover obtains one of Como's discarded cigarette butts Then on Christmas Eve, 1998, Mac calls Arthur Young at the lab.
I watched as the information came off the computer, and I equate it to being a lottery winner on a Saturday night, watching the numbers roll down, and I'm looking at my ticket. 1 match, 2 match, 3 match, 4 match. And after a certain point, I just said, this is it. This case can finally be closed, and I can get it off my desk. It had been sitting there for that long, 6 years.
Ernest Randall Como was arrested.
Afterwards, after he was handcuffed, it appears as though he became very down. It's like it was all over, which is what I told him. I told him it was over. He didn't have to worry anymore. It was over.
He confesses for 6.5 hours, even admitting to 2 investigators hadn't known about. It turns out Como was a prowler, not a stalker. When he saw a house that appeared to be without a man, he would come back later with his kit and look for an open window. What made Como's mental and physical assault on these women especially odious was that he had worked in youth services with teens who'd been.
I look at it as Randy Como is a rapist trying to be a police officer, not a policeman out raping folks. Because nobody that's sworn to do what we're sworn to do would go out and do a thing like that.
Ernest Randall Como was sentenced to 25 years on 19 counts of. There are a lot of women who can now have some closure in their lives, knowing that the person who traumatized them has been caught and is finally being punished.
I think Lafayette and the surrounding areas of Acadiana were very fortunate to have an individual like Mac Gallion on this case, because I'm certain that without him, this case would not have reached a conclusion.
But for Mac Gallion, the real heroes of the case are the forensic scientists and the women themselves. And in particular, one woman who was willing to journey into her subconscious to help capture a dangerous predator. The stories on Exhibit A are based on true cases. The forensic scientists and investigators are the actual individuals who worked on the cases. The names of the victims are fictitious. The names of the guilty are real.